This story is titled, My Family Forced Me to Babysit My Stepbrother's Child 24/7 while the parents partied at clubs and wasted all their savings, so I showed them what I really think about free childcare. Sup Reddit. It's currently 4 a.m., and I'm lying here wide awake, watching my phone light up with what has to be the 40-second text message calling me a family betrayer and selfish bastard. All of this drama stems from one simple fact. I refuse to be my brother's free daycare while his wife tries to become the next fitness influencer. How the hell did I get to this point? Let me break down this entire mess for you. I'm a 29-year-old male graphic designer who works remotely for a high-end marketing firm. I make decent money and live in a nice downtown apartment with my girlfriend Luna. We've built this lifestyle where we travel somewhere new every month. Nothing over the top, just exploring different places because that's what keeps us sane and motivated. We busted our asses to build careers that would allow us this kind of flexibility and freedom. I didn't just stumble into this comfortable situation. I spent 5 grueling years in college pulling all-nighters and surviving on instant noodles to get my graphic design degree. After graduation, I put in another 3 years grinding through entry-level positions, dealing with demanding clients and impossible deadlines, before finally landing this remote gig that pays well and gives me the flexibility I wanted. Luna went through a similar journey with her marketing career, working her way up from intern to a senior position that also allows remote work. We didn't inherit money or get lucky. We earned every bit of this lifestyle through careful planning, hard work, and strategic career moves. This becomes important context for what happened next, because apparently some people think our success came easily and that we owe them something because of it. About a year ago, my brother Marcus, who's 36, and his wife Vanessa, who's 33, moved to Nashville with their 6-year-old son Tyler. Initially, their story seemed completely legitimate and well-planned. Vanessa had landed a solid position at a prestigious accounting firm here, which represented a genuine step-up from her previous job in Ohio. The salary increase was significant, and the company had an excellent reputation in the industry. Marcus found a low-level manager position at a sporting goods chain, though it came with terrible hours. Nights, weekends, the whole unpredictable retail schedule that makes planning anything nearly impossible. At first, their story checked out perfectly. They appeared to be an ambitious couple making a strategic move for better career opportunities, which I respected and supported. In the beginning, they would ask me to watch Tyler maybe once every few weeks when their work schedules overlapped in particularly inconvenient ways. It honestly wasn't a big deal at the time. Tyler was actually pretty chill back then. He would sit around quietly playing with his action figures or watching cartoons while I worked on my design projects. I'm not particularly into kids and have never wanted any of my own, but I figured this was just normal uncle duty, and frankly, it wasn't too disruptive to my routine. Tyler was genuinely well-behaved during those early visits. He was quiet, polite, and generally easy to handle. He'd sit in the corner of my workspace with his coloring books while I focused on client projects, occasionally asking for a snack or help with something minor. Sometimes when I finished work for the day, we'd order pizza and watch a movie together. It felt like a reasonable family arrangement that worked for everyone involved. Then about 6 months after they moved to Nashville, everything changed dramatically. Marcus showed up at my place on his day off, and something felt immediately different about his demeanor. He seemed weirdly nervous and rehearsed, like he'd been practicing this conversation in his head for days. He kept fidgeting with his wedding ring and clearing his throat repeatedly, as if he was about to give a speech he didn't believe in himself. He started telling me about how Vanessa had discovered this incredible opportunity to become a fitness influencer. According to Marcus, she'd always been into working out and had the perfect look for Instagram, the kind of aesthetic that would supposedly translate into massive social media success. He laid out this elaborate plan about how she was going to quit her accounting job. Remember, this was their main source of stable income, to pursue fitness influencing full-time. The timing is perfect, he kept saying, though he couldn't seem to make eye contact with me while delivering these lines. He explained that fitness influencers were apparently making 6-figure incomes once they hit 100,000 followers, and Vanessa already had a detailed content plan mapped out for the first 3 months. The way he was reciting these talking points, I could practically hear Vanessa feeding them to him word for word. It was like watching a hostage video, except the hostage was my brother's personality and independent thinking. When I asked the obvious question about the massive financial hit they'd take from Vanessa quitting her well-paying accounting position, Marcus mumbled something vague about short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. and how they had supposedly run the numbers to make sure everything would work out. The rehearsed nature of his responses was becoming more obvious with each answer, and I realized I wasn't really talking to my brother anymore. I was talking to someone reciting Vanessa's script. Then came the real reason for his visit, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Since Marcus worked these long, unpredictable retail hours, and Vanessa would be dedicating her days to creating fitness content, they needed someone reliable to watch Tyler during the day. That someone, according to their plan, was going to be me. Their reasoning was that since I work from home and have flexibility in my schedule, I was the obvious choice for their childcare needs. We thought about daycare, Marcus said, still avoiding direct eye contact. But they're all so expensive and impersonal. Tyler needs to be with family, and you're so good with him. He loves his uncle, right? And it's not like you have to go into an office or anything. The implication was clear. Because I work remotely, my time and professional responsibilities were somehow less important or demanding than a traditional office job. Looking back, I should have shut this entire proposition down right then and there. I should have explained that working from home doesn't mean I'm available for childcare, and that my remote job is just as demanding and time-sensitive as any office position. But in that moment, I was completely caught off guard by the audacity of the request, and honestly, I felt genuinely bad for Marcus. He seemed stressed and overwhelmed by their situation, and I could see the strain this whole transition was putting on him. So against my better judgment, I agreed to help out occasionally while they worked through their transition period. I emphasized that this would be temporary assistance, just a couple of days here and there, until they could figure out a more permanent childcare solution. I thought I was being a supportive brother during a difficult time. What I didn't realize was that I had just walked directly into a carefully laid trap. 2 weeks later, guess who called asking if I could watch Tyler for just a few hours? Then it was twice that week. Then it became every single day. Before I knew what had happened, I had somehow become their unpaid full-time babysitter working a 9-to-5 schedule that I never agreed to. The occasional help had morphed into a permanent arrangement without any discussion or my explicit consent. My actual career started tanking almost immediately. I found myself having to reschedule important client meetings because I was chasing after a 6-year-old who had somehow transformed from that quiet, well-behaved kid into a tiny terrorist. Tyler would scream and make noise during my Zoom calls with clients, completely disrupting professional presentations I'd spent hours preparing. He treated my carefully organized workspace like his personal playground, moving my equipment around and generally making it impossible to maintain any semblance of professionalism. The decline in my work quality became noticeable pretty quickly. My boss pulled me aside during a virtual team meeting and asked if everything was okay, specifically mentioning that my last 3 design submissions weren't up to my usual standards. The designs lacked the attention to detail and creative polish that had earned me recognition in the firm. I had to lie about having some personal issues and promised to get back on track, all while Tyler was literally drawing on my living room wall with markers in the background. It was humiliating and professionally damaging. I tried talking to Marcus about the situation twice, hoping we could find a solution that worked for everyone. The first time, he gave me a dismissive response along the lines of, "Yeah, sorry, I'll talk to Tyler about behaving better." Naturally, nothing changed after that conversation. Tyler continued to be disruptive, and the impact on my work continued to worsen. The second time I brought up my concerns, Marcus got completely defensive and started reciting more lines that clearly came directly from Vanessa. He told me that Tyler was just being a normal kid, and that I needed to be more understanding of a child's natural behavior. There was no acknowledgement of how this arrangement was affecting my career, my income, or my professional reputation. It was becoming clear that they viewed my concerns as secondary to their convenience. Meanwhile, Vanessa was posting daily workout videos on her social media accounts, complete with inspirational quotes about pursuing your dreams and living your best life. She was building her brand and chasing her influencer aspirations while I was essentially raising her kid for free. Marcus continued working his retail job that barely covered their car payment, let alone their other mounting expenses. The financial planning they claimed to have done was clearly non-existent. As the weeks went on, things continued to deteriorate. Tyler became more disruptive and demanding by the day, as if he could sense that the boundaries were completely gone. Vanessa started dropping him off with bags full of noisy toys specifically designed to make concentration impossible. Loud electronic games, toys with sirens and music, construction sets that required constant adult supervision. It was like she was deliberately sabotaging my ability to work. She would roll up in her leased luxury SUV at 8:30 a.m., usually arriving 30 minutes earlier than we'd agreed upon, which disrupted my morning routine and preparation time for the day's work. Tyler would burst into my apartment like a tornado, immediately demanding breakfast even though I knew damn well they had plenty of food at their own place. It became clear that they were using me not just for childcare, but as a meal service as well. Vanessa would hand me Tyler's backpack while already talking on her phone to someone about content planning, engagement strategies, and brand partnerships that existed only in her imagination. Most days, she wouldn't even make eye contact with me. She was too busy discussing her next workout video or complaining about the algorithm affecting her reach. She'd just yell, "Thanks, pick up at 5," as she walked back to her car, still completely absorbed in her phone conversation about her non-existent influencer career. The real breaking point came one evening when Vanessa was picking Tyler up after I'd watched him for 9 straight hours. It had been a particularly rough day, where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Tyler had a complete meltdown right in the middle of an important client presentation I was giving over Zoom. He knocked over my energy drink, which spilled all over some design sketches I'd been working on for hours. To top it all off, he told me my apartment was boring at least 17 times throughout the day. By the time Vanessa arrived for pickup, I was at my absolute limit. While Tyler was gathering his scattered toys and belongings, Vanessa started walking around my apartment like she owned the place, inspecting everything with this critical eye. She stopped in front of my glass coffee table, the one I'd bought to celebrate landing my current job, and ran her hand along the edge with a disapproving expression. "You should really get rid of this before Tyler hurts himself," she said, with this fake concerned voice that made my skin crawl. The audacity of suggesting I should remove my own furniture to accommodate her kid was staggering. Then she pointed to my carefully arranged bookshelves and said, "Those should be secured to the wall." I read an article about furniture tipping hazards, and with Tyler spending so much time here, we need to think about safety. Next, she noticed my collection of design awards and portfolio pieces displayed on a shelf, and suggested I put those somewhere safer where Tyler couldn't reach them. But then she dropped the real bomb that made everything crystal clear. She actually laughed and said, "We should probably childproof your place properly since my fitness channel is really taking off. Once I hit 10,000 followers, we're partnering with this supplement company, and I'll need even more time to create content. You'll be watching Tyler even more than you already are." I stood there completely speechless, processing what she'd just said. This woman was telling me to redecorate my own apartment to accommodate her kid, a kid I never signed up to raise in the first place. She wasn't even asking anymore, she was just assuming this had become my new permanent life arrangement. It was like I had nothing better to do than rearrange my entire home and professional life around her child and her completely delusional Instagram fantasies. The presumption was breathtaking. She was planning my future for me, deciding that I would be watching Tyler even more to support her imaginary career as a fitness influencer. She had 10,000 followers in her head, supplement company partnerships that didn't exist, and a thriving business built entirely on wishful thinking. Meanwhile, I was supposed to sacrifice my career, my space, and my sanity to make her delusions possible. I didn't even bother arguing with her at that point. Experience had taught me that her words meant absolutely nothing. She lived in a fantasy world where everything revolved around her aspirations. I just wanted her to grab her kid and get the hell out of my place so I could try to salvage what was left of my workday and my sanity. The final confrontation that changed everything happened last week. Luna and I were sitting on my balcony, planning our first real trip in 3 months. We hadn't been able to travel anywhere because of my new involuntary job as an unpaid childcare provider. We were genuinely excited about a 2-week trip to Costa Rica that we'd planned for Valentine's Day. We'd been saving for this specific trip for almost a year, researching everything we wanted to see and do. We had the whole itinerary mapped out. Rainforests in Manuel Antonio, beaches in Guanacaste, zip lining, wildlife tours, everything. It was supposed to be our big Valentine's celebration, and honestly, it might even have been the trip where I finally proposed to Luna. Marcus and Vanessa showed up unannounced to drop off Tyler, which was already annoying since we'd been trying to have a private planning session. They overheard us talking excitedly about our Costa Rica plans, and I could immediately see Vanessa's face getting all pinched and Marcus looking uncomfortable. There was that sudden, unmistakable tension in the air that happens when people realize you have plans that don't revolve around them and their needs. After Tyler ran off to what had basically become his room in my apartment, Vanessa asked how I planned to watch Tyler if I was going to be out of the country for 2 weeks. Before I could even formulate an answer, she launched into a full lecture about how I needed to stop with these immature vacations and start taking responsibility as an uncle. Marcus just stood there, nodding along like a bobblehead, completely backing up everything she said without any independent thought. I noticed Luna's face getting redder by the second. She's usually super chill and diplomatic in conflict situations, but even she was reaching her absolute limit with these two people and their entitled behavior. Tyler needs stability, Vanessa continued, her voice taking on this condescending tone like she was explaining basic life concepts to a child. He's already getting so attached to you, and it's really selfish to just take off for 2 weeks without considering his emotional needs. Something inside me just completely snapped at that moment. All the months of accumulated frustration, resentment, and anger came pouring out at once. I told them straight to their faces that their kid was not my responsibility, and that I wasn't putting my life on hold because Vanessa decided to chase Instagram fame instead of maintaining her stable, well-paying career. I pointed out that I never agreed to be their full-time unpaid nanny, and that this entire arrangement had been forced on me through manipulation and guilt trips. I reminded them that I had a career, a relationship, and a life of my own that didn't revolve around their kid or their poor financial decisions. I'd been more than generous with my time and flexibility, but they'd taken complete advantage of my willingness to help family. Marcus immediately called me selfish, parroting Vanessa's talking points about family values and stepping up when family needs you. I shot back that family values don't include being taken advantage of and manipulated, and if they couldn't afford proper childcare on his retail salary while Vanessa's influencer career was making zero actual money, maybe they should have thought about that before she quit her stable accounting job. Do you have any idea how hard it is to break into the fitness influencer market? Vanessa snapped, her voice rising to a near shout. It takes time and dedication. I'm building something here that could change our entire future. Yeah, and you're building it on my back, I shot back without hesitation. You quit your job assuming I'd pick up the slack with free childcare. You didn't even ask if I was okay watching Tyler every single day. You just decided that's what I was going to do, like my time and career don't matter. The argument escalated quickly from there. Vanessa called me immature and said I was throwing away money on pointless trips when I could be helping them build their brand. The entitlement was absolutely staggering. She actually believed I should be investing my money in her fantasy career instead of enjoying the life Luna and I had worked hard to create. I told them what I did with my money was none of their damn business, and that their financial problems weren't my responsibility to solve. You've changed, Marcus said, looking at me with this disappointed expression like I'd somehow betrayed fundamental family values. You used to care about family, and you used to have your own thoughts, I replied, not backing down an inch. Now you just repeat whatever Vanessa tells you to say, like you don't have a mind of your own anymore. Luna stepped in at that point, trying to defuse the rapidly escalating situation before it got completely out of hand. She suggested in her diplomatic way that maybe they could find a part-time daycare solution, at least while we were away on our vacation. It was a reasonable compromise that would give them time to figure out a more permanent arrangement while still allowing us to take the trip we'd been planning and saving for. Vanessa turned on Luna instantly, like a snake striking. She said she wouldn't expect someone without kids to understand the complexities of childcare decisions, and then implied that Luna was behind my newfound selfishness. The attack was completely unprovoked and unfair. Luna had been nothing but supportive and patient throughout this entire ordeal, even when it was negatively affecting our relationship and travel plans. That was the moment I completely lost it. Nobody talks to my girlfriend like that, especially not in our own home. And especially not when Luna had been trying to help find a solution. Nobody talks to my girlfriend like that, especially not in our own home, I said, pointing directly at the door. Take your nightmare kid and get the hell out of my apartment right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Vanessa seemed genuinely shocked that I'd finally reached my breaking point and was willing to kick them out. They eventually grabbed Tyler and his scattered belongings and stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind them hard enough to rattle the walls. That night, Marcus sent me a text saying he was disappointed in me, and that he never thought I would abandon family when they needed me most. The message was full of guilt trip language about how family is supposed to stick together through difficult times. The next day, I started getting calls from both sets of parents, and I realized that Marcus and Vanessa had immediately launched a full-scale campaign to turn the entire family against me. My dad called me irresponsible and said I was always the selfish one in the family, which was rich considering the years of favoritism Marcus had received growing up. My mom said that family comes first, and that my stupid trips could wait until Tyler was older and didn't need as much supervision. The implication was that my life should be on hold indefinitely while they figured out their financial mess. Vanessa's mom sent me a novel-length text message about how I had made her daughter cry and how real men step up for family instead of prioritizing their own selfish desires. The message was full of emotional manipulation and guilt trips designed to make me feel like a terrible person for setting reasonable boundaries. I turned off my phone and didn't respond to any of these messages. I was done engaging with their emotional manipulation and guilt trips. Luna backed me up completely throughout this whole ordeal, though I could see the stress was getting to her too. The constant family drama was affecting our relationship, and I could tell she was relieved that I'd finally stood my ground. I kept lying awake at night, wondering if I really was the selfish one in this situation. The constant barrage of criticism from family members was making me second-guess my decision. But the more I thought about it objectively, the more everything started to make sense, and I began to see the bigger picture of what had really happened. Marcus and Vanessa didn't move to Nashville for better job opportunities like they'd originally claimed. They moved here with a plan to use me as free childcare from the very beginning. Vanessa quitting her job wasn't a spontaneous decision based on sudden influencer success. It was always part of their long-term strategy. They'd calculated that they could manipulate me into providing free childcare while she pursued her fantasy career, and they'd been working toward that goal from the moment they decided to move to my city. I started connecting the dots and realized the situation was even worse than I'd initially thought. I honestly wasn't fully aware of how bad their financial situation had become until I started digging deeper. A mutual friend casually mentioned that Marcus was working double shifts at his retail job, which seemed odd if things were going as well as they claimed. Then I saw one of Vanessa's old social media posts where she casually thanked her online fam for supporting her new journey, even though her follower count hadn't moved significantly in weeks. That led me to start asking around more discreetly, and a few quiet conversations with people who knew them filled in the rest of the disturbing picture. Marcus's retail job was barely covering half their monthly rent, let alone their other expenses. Vanessa had blown through their savings account buying expensive camera equipment, professional editing software, a personal trainer to help design her workout content, and basically everything except common sense and realistic financial planning. The financial irresponsibility was staggering. They were leasing 2 luxury SUVs that they absolutely couldn't afford on Marcus's income alone. They were living in an overpriced high-rise apartment because it looked good as a backdrop for Vanessa's content, even though it was completely beyond their means. They were eating out constantly because Vanessa claimed she was too tired to cook after spending hours filming and editing videos that got maybe a dozen views. They were drowning in credit card debt that was accumulating interest faster than Marcus could make minimum payments. But none of this financial chaos excused their manipulative behavior toward me. If anything, it explained their desperation and why they'd been so aggressive about securing free childcare. They literally couldn't afford any other option because of their poor financial decisions. Looking back, I should have seen this manipulation coming from a mile away. Our parents had always favored Marcus throughout our childhood and adolescence. He was the star athlete, the charming one, the guy everyone naturally liked and gravitated toward. I was the quiet kid who spent hours drawing and designing things, pursuing interests that didn't translate into the kind of social recognition that Marcus effortlessly received. In our parents' eyes, Marcus could do absolutely no wrong, and it seemed like my role in the family was to support whatever Marcus decided to do. There was this unspoken expectation that family members should drop everything to help each other. But somehow that obligation only ever seemed to flow in Marcus's direction when push came to shove. Growing up, I had to miss important art competitions and design showcases because they conflicted with Marcus's football games. Our parents insisted that supporting Marcus's athletic career was more important than my artistic pursuits. They never displayed my design awards or acknowledged my academic achievements. But our house was basically a shrine to Marcus's athletic trophies and newspaper clippings about his sports accomplishments. When I got accepted to design school with a partial scholarship that I'd worked incredibly hard to earn, they barely acknowledged the achievement. But when Marcus decided to drop out of community college to find himself and figure out what he really wanted to do with his life, they supported him financially for 3 years without question. The double standard was obvious and painful, but I'd learned to accept it as just how our family operated. I moved to Nashville for my design job 5 years ago and decided to stay after my career really took off and I found success in the industry. Marcus and Vanessa had been living in Ohio with her family before making their move here. Our parents still live in Virginia, and Vanessa's parents remain in Ohio. We're literally the only family members living in Nashville, which confirms my theory that they moved here specifically to use me as their free childcare solution. The geographic isolation wasn't a coincidence. They'd deliberately chosen to relocate to the one city where I lived, far from any other family members who might have been able to help with Tyler or see through their manipulation tactics. After thinking everything over carefully, I decided to try one more conversation with Marcus before completely cutting ties. I invited him to meet at a neutral cafe near my place, figuring that neutral territory would be safer than having another confrontation in my apartment where emotions could escalate quickly. I genuinely wanted to try being reasonable and see if we could reach some kind of workable solution that didn't involve me being their unpaid full-time nanny. I started the conversation by apologizing for calling Tyler a nightmare child during our argument. While I couldn't continue being their regular childcare provider, I genuinely regretted how harshly I'd expressed my frustration about the situation. I explained that the constant interruptions and behavioral issues were affecting my career in serious ways, but I acknowledged that taking my anger out on a 6-year-old wasn't fair or appropriate. Marcus actually seemed receptive at first, which gave me hope that I might be talking to my actual brother again instead of Vanessa's programmed spokesperson. He apologized for taking advantage of my time and generosity and said he understood why I was upset about how the arrangement had evolved. He seemed genuinely remorseful about how they'd gradually increased their demands on my time without considering the impact on my life and career. For about 5 minutes, I thought I was having a real conversation with the brother I used to know. He seemed genuinely sorry about the situation and was admitting that they had put way too much responsibility on me without considering how it would affect my professional life, my relationship with Luna, and my overall well-being. Then, like someone had flipped a switch or activated some kind of remote control, his tone completely changed. His eyes went blank and unfocused, and he started reciting what was obviously Vanessa's prepared script about how I clearly didn't understand how hard it was to build an influencer career from scratch. He talked about how families should support each other through difficult transitions and major life changes. It was genuinely eerie to witness, like watching someone get possessed in real time. One second, he was my brother expressing his own thoughts and feelings, and the next second, he was Vanessa's ventriloquist dummy, repeating her talking points word for word. The transformation was so dramatic and obvious that it was almost scary to observe. I cut him off mid-sentence and said, "Dude, I know those aren't your words. That's Vanessa talking through you. I want to know what you actually think about all this situation." He looked startled, and then immediately became defensive, as if I'd accused him of something terrible. "Vanessa and I are a team," he said robotically. "Her thoughts are my thoughts. We make decisions together as a unified partnership. That's not how healthy marriages work," I replied. "You're still supposed to be your own person with your own opinions and thoughts. Can you give me your original thoughts about this situation, not Vanessa's script?" "Easy for you to say," he snapped, suddenly showing some genuine emotion again. "You and Luna have it all figured out, right? Perfect jobs, perfect relationship, jetting off to Costa Rica whenever you feel like it. Some of us have real responsibilities and can't just live like carefree college students forever. Responsibilities that you chose," I reminded him firmly. "Nobody forced you to have a kid. Nobody forced Vanessa to quit her stable, well-paying job to chase Instagram fame." Then Marcus dropped a bomb that explained so much about the pressure I'd been receiving from the extended family. It turns out both sets of parents had been actively encouraging Marcus and Vanessa to use me for childcare, and they'd been coordinating their guilt trips and manipulation tactics. My mom had apparently told Vanessa directly that I needed to grow up and start supporting family members, and that my constant traveling was childish and irresponsible behavior for someone my age. My dad had told them that I needed to learn real responsibility and that it was about time I contributed something meaningful to the family, instead of just focusing on my own selfish pursuits. Vanessa's parents had suggested that since I work from home and make easy money drawing pretty pictures, I should be grateful for the opportunity to help family members who were struggling with real-world responsibilities. These people were absolute scumbags, every single one of them. The coordinated manipulation campaign was disgusting, and it revealed how little respect any of them had for my career, my time, or my autonomy as an adult. I tried explaining to Marcus how exhausted and frustrated I'd become over the past months. I told him about the constant interruptions during important client calls, how my work quality had declined significantly, and how Luna and I had been forced to cancel 3 separate trips because of the childcare expectations they'd placed on me, I described how the situation was affecting my mental health, making me stressed and resentful in ways that were spilling over into other areas of my life. I explained the warning I'd received from my boss about my declining performance, and how I was genuinely on thin ice professionally because of the dramatic drop in my work quality. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was threatening my livelihood and career reputation that I'd spent years building. I tried to make him understand that graphic design isn't just drawing pretty pictures, like his in-laws seem to think. It's a demanding profession with strict deadlines, client expectations, and constant pressure to produce high-quality creative work. The constant interruptions and childcare responsibilities were making it impossible to meet the professional standards that my job required. "I love Tyler," I said, trying to appeal to whatever brotherly connection we still had. "But I'm not his parent. I never signed up to raise him. And you guys aren't even giving me the basic courtesy of asking if I'm okay with watching him every day. You're just assuming I'll do it, like my time and professional obligations don't matter at all." The conversation took a wild turn when Marcus asked what I suggested they do instead if I wasn't going to continue providing childcare. Before I could even mention the obvious solutions like daycare options or part-time babysitters, he interrupted me in a completely defensive way. He said that if I wouldn't watch Tyler anymore, then the least I could do was pay for his childcare and help with their other mounting expenses. After all, he reasoned, I had enough disposable income to jet off to another country every month, like some kind of trust fund kid. The entitlement was absolutely breathtaking. They wanted either my time or my money, and they felt entitled to both options simply because we were related. I sat there for a moment just staring at him while my brain processed this new level of audacity and entitlement. The sheer nerve of these people, thinking they were somehow entitled to either my unpaid labor or my hard-earned money, was absolutely mind-blowing. And here I'd been wondering if maybe I was the asshole in this situation. No, I was seeing everything with perfect clarity now. "So let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice level and controlled. "You and Vanessa make a series of terrible financial decisions. She quits her stable, well-paying job to chase Instagram fame that's generating zero income. You move into an apartment you can't afford, lease cars you can't afford, and run up credit card debt you can't pay off. And somehow, all of this becomes my problem to solve?" Marcus had the decency to look embarrassed by my summary of their situation, but he didn't back down from his demands. "We're family," he said, like those two words explained and justified everything they'd put me through. I stared at him for a long moment, feeling a mixture of disappointment and anger at what our relationship had become. "You know what, Marcus? This attitude right here is exactly your problem. You refuse to man up and handle your own responsibilities. You let Vanessa make terrible financial decisions without any pushback. You parrot and agree with whatever she says regardless of how unrealistic it is. And now, you want me to bail you out instead of finding actual solutions." I continued, "If you're not willing to stand up for yourself and find real solutions instead of just using other people, then we're done here. I'm not helping with anything. Not childcare, not money, nothing. You need to figure out your own life." His face turned bright red with anger and embarrassment. He stood up so fast that his chair fell over backward with a loud crash. "Fuck you," he spat, his voice loud enough to draw stares from other customers. "You've always been a selfish piece of shit. You think you're so much better than everyone with your fancy job and your trips. You know what? We don't need your help. Never did. Have fun being alone when you're old because you chose money over family." He stormed out of the cafe, deliberately knocking into a server on his way to make his dramatic exit even more disruptive. I sat there calmly finishing my coffee, feeling strangely peaceful despite the scene he'd just caused. It felt like something that had needed to snap for a long time had finally broken, and I was relieved to have it over with. I left a generous tip for the server who had to deal with Marcus's tantrum and childish behavior, then walked home feeling lighter than I had in months. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe freely again without the constant stress and resentment that had been building up for so long. When I checked my messages later that evening, I had a barrage of texts from Marcus, Vanessa, my parents, and even Vanessa's parents. All of them were expressing their disappointment in my cruelty and abandonment of family during their time of need. The coordinated response was clearly planned, as if they'd all gotten together to decide on the most effective guilt trip strategy. My mom's message was particularly rich with irony and manipulation. "We raised you better than this," she wrote. "Your brother needs help and you're turning your back on him. I never thought my own son would be so heartless toward his own family." I couldn't resist texting back, Funny how Marcus needs help because of his and Vanessa's bad decisions, and somehow that becomes my responsibility to fix. Where's your lecture to them about taking responsibility for their choices? She replied immediately, "That's different and you know it. They're trying to build something meaningful with their lives. You're just being selfish and prioritizing your own pleasure over family obligations." The double standard was so obvious it was almost laughable. When I made good financial decisions and worked hard to build a successful career that allowed me to travel and enjoy life, I was being selfish. But when they made terrible financial decisions and expected me to bail them out, that was just family helping family. I decided I couldn't care less about their opinions anymore. I had tried everything possible to be reasonable and find a compromise that worked for everyone. Now, they could figure out their own problems however they wanted, without involving me in their drama or expecting me to sacrifice my life for their poor choices. I confirmed my Costa Rica booking with Luna, feeling excited about our trip for the first time in months. I scheduled a meeting with my boss to discuss getting back on track professionally and rebuilding the reputation I'd worked so hard to establish. I spent the weekend rearranging my apartment back to exactly how I liked it, with my glass coffee table positioned front and center where it belonged. I put my design awards back on prominent display where I could see them and feel proud of my accomplishments. Luna and I hung some new artwork we'd been meaning to put up for months, and I reclaimed my space from the child-proofing suggestions and constant disruptions. It felt symbolic somehow, like I was taking back control of my life and my environment after months of having it dictated by other people's needs and demands. Luna and I went on our Costa Rica trip exactly as planned, and it was absolutely everything we'd hoped it would be. We spent 2 weeks completely away from all the family drama, exploring rainforests and beaches, ziplining through the canopy, and reconnecting with each other without any external pressures or interruptions. I kept my phone on airplane mode most of the time, only checking work emails when absolutely necessary. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. There was no screaming kid disrupting my peace, no entitled family members making demands on my time, no guilt trips or manipulation tactics to deal with. It was just me and Luna living the life we'd worked hard to build and afford, enjoying the freedom and experiences that our career success had made possible. The trip was everything we'd dreamed it would be and more. One evening, sitting on a pristine beach, watching an incredible sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Luna turned to me and said, "I'm really proud of you for standing up to your family. You deserve this break and this happiness." That moment right there made all the drama and conflict worth it, knowing that I'd chosen my own well-being and my relationship over toxic family manipulation. When we returned home refreshed and reconnected, I had dozens of missed calls and voicemail messages from various family members. Most were variations on the same tired theme. I was selfish, irresponsible, and abandoning my family in their time of greatest need. My mother had left a particularly nasty voicemail saying she had failed as a parent if this was how I treated family members, and that I should be ashamed to call myself Marcus's brother. I deleted most of the messages without listening to them completely. I was absolutely done with this toxic nonsense and decided to let them all stew in their self-created problems. They could figure out their own solutions without trying to guilt-trip me into sacrificing my life for their poor decisions. What I didn't expect was finding Marcus sitting in his car outside my apartment building when I got home from work one day about a week after our return. He looked like absolute hell, unshaven, red-eyed, wearing a wrinkled uniform shirt from his retail job. This wasn't the usual put-together image he always tried to maintain for social media and public appearances. His hair was unwashed and greasy, his eyes had dark circles under them like he hadn't slept in days, and he looked like he'd lost a significant amount of weight. This wasn't the same confident, arrogant brother who'd stormed out of the cafe a month earlier. "Can we talk?" he asked when he saw me approaching. "Just us? No Vanessa, no Tyler, no family drama. Just brothers talking honestly with each other." I was skeptical about his motives, but I have to admit he looked like he genuinely needed someone to talk to. I'm not completely heartless despite what my family seemed to think, so I agreed to let him come up to my apartment for a conversation. Once we got inside, the floodgates completely opened, and Marcus started telling me just how badly everything had fallen apart. Vanessa's influencer career was a complete and total bust. After 6 months of dedicated effort, she had barely managed to gain 500 followers, and most of those were family members and pity follows from old coworkers who felt sorry for her. The supplement company partnership she'd been bragging about was actually just a basic affiliate link that had earned a grand total of $37 over several months. What a shocking surprise that being a fitness influencer was actually hard work, and not some magical get-rich-quick scheme that anyone could succeed at just by posting workout videos. She spends hours every day filming and editing these elaborate workout videos that get maybe 12 views if she's lucky, Marcus said, running his hands through his greasy, unwashed hair. She keeps saying we just need to push through until she hits that magic number of followers that will change everything, but it's clearly not happening. The algorithm doesn't care about her content, and people aren't interested in what she's offering. Meanwhile, their credit card debt had spiraled completely out of control to over $35,000. They were 3 months behind on their rent and facing immediate eviction from their expensive apartment. Marcus had been written up twice at his retail job for constantly calling out when Vanessa had important shoots and needed him to watch Tyler during his scheduled work hours. "My boss told me point blank that if I miss another shift, I'm fired," Marcus said, his voice cracking with stress. But Vanessa doesn't want to hear about it. She says I'm not being supportive enough of her dreams and that I need to prioritize her career over my job. But here's the cherry on top of this disaster Sunday. Vanessa was now pregnant with baby number 2. Apparently, she thought that a pregnancy fitness journey would finally be her ticket to influencer success and social media fame. "Holy freaking hell," I said, unable to hide my shock at this news. "It wasn't planned," Marcus said quickly, seeing my horrified expression. But when it happened, Vanessa saw it as a golden opportunity. She says pregnancy content gets way more engagement than regular fitness videos, and there are tons of companies that specifically want to sponsor expecting mothers and pregnancy-related products. "And you actually believed her?" I asked, genuinely incredulous that anyone could be that delusional about social media success. He shook his head slowly, looking defeated. "Not really, but what was I supposed to do?" She was already excited about it and making plans for how this would finally make her influencer career take off. "I don't know what to do anymore," Marcus said, his voice breaking with genuine desperation. "I can't sleep. I can't think clearly. Everything in our lives is falling apart and I feel completely helpless to stop it." I asked if he'd reached out to our parents for help with their financial crisis, since they'd been so vocal about family obligations and supporting each other. His laugh was bitter and completely humorless. "They said we made our bed and now we have to lie in it," he replied. "Dad told me I should have controlled my wife better and not let her quit her stable job to chase stupid dreams. Mom said they're not in a position to help us financially, but she'd be happy to call you again and tell you to step up and do your family duty." The hypocrisy was absolutely unreal and infuriating. These were the exact same people who had been blowing up my phone for weeks about family values and how I needed to support Marcus during his difficult time. But when it came time for them to actually help their own son with real financial assistance, suddenly it was all about personal responsibility and learning life lessons. "Did you remind them about how they were just telling me I needed to help you out?" I asked. "Yeah," Marcus sighed heavily. "Mom said that was different because you're single with no kids and no real responsibilities." "I'm not single," I reminded him firmly. "I've been with Luna for 3 years in a committed relationship." "You know what she meant," he said dismissively. "No real responsibilities like a mortgage and children." I bit my tongue and decided not to argue about that particular point right now, since Marcus was clearly going through enough stress without me adding to it. Vanessa's parents were proving to be no better than mine. They'd offered to let Vanessa and Tyler move back to Ohio, but specifically without Marcus. They blamed him entirely for enabling her foolish dreams, instead of putting his foot down like a real man should have done. "Her dad said I was a failure as a provider," Marcus said, his voice hollow and defeated. "He said their daughter deserved better than a retail manager who couldn't even pay rent on time. I mean, her father definitely had a valid point about Marcus's shortcomings, but I didn't say anything because Marcus completely broke down at that moment. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered, like he was afraid Vanessa might somehow hear him through the walls. "I've been parroting Vanessa's words and ideas for so long that I don't know what I actually think about anything. Watching you stand your ground and refuse to be manipulated made me realize what a complete doormat I've become over the years." Then he said something that shocked me. "I don't even want to be married to her anymore, but I'm completely trapped. I can barely support myself on my retail income, let alone Tyler and another baby on the way." I felt torn between genuine sympathy for my brother's situation and lingering anger about everything they'd put me through. But seeing him hit rock bottom like this, I decided to help him on my own terms with clear boundaries. I told him I would help him get his life together, but not by providing free babysitting or giving financial handouts. Second, he needed to grow a spine and start standing up to Vanessa and our parents, instead of just going along with whatever they demanded. He nodded eagerly and asked what he should do first. Seeing that he was actually asking for real advice instead of just expecting me to solve his problems, I realized this was about much more than just childcare arrangements. My brother needed to find his backbone again. He'd spent so long being Vanessa's yes man that he'd completely forgotten how to think for himself or make independent decisions. First, I hired a financial advisor as a one-time gift to help them understand exactly how bad their situation really was. The advisor spent 3 intensive sessions going through their finances with brutal honesty and creating a realistic budget based on their actual income. It was absolutely brutal to witness. They were living beyond their means in every single category imaginable, from their overpriced apartment to their luxury car leases to Vanessa's constant Amazon orders of expensive influencer props that served no practical purpose. Based on the financial advisor's comprehensive recommendations, they needed to make immediate and drastic changes to avoid complete financial ruin. They needed to break their apartment lease and move to a much cheaper place that actually fit their budget. They needed to sell both of their luxury vehicles and get something practical and affordable. They needed to create and stick to a strict budget for all their expenses, cutting out unnecessary spending entirely. They needed to find affordable, reliable childcare for Tyler that didn't depend on manipulating family members. But the biggest and most important recommendation was also the hardest one for them to accept. Vanessa needed to go back to accounting immediately. Her accounting income had been carrying their entire household financially, and Marcus's retail manager salary simply wasn't sufficient to support a family of 3, let alone 4 with another baby coming. The math was simple and undeniable, regardless of Vanessa's feelings about returning to a boring career. The financial advisor didn't sugarcoat anything or try to spare their feelings. He laid out exactly how screwed they were if they didn't make these changes immediately and consistently. He explained that bankruptcy was a very real possibility if they continued on their current financial path for much longer. He showed them detailed projections of how their debt would compound over 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years if nothing changed. The numbers were absolutely staggering and terrifying to look at. "You cannot afford to live in this city on one income," he told them bluntly during their final session. "Not with your current expenses, not with another child on the way, and definitely not while one of you pursues a hobby that generates no income." The big question mark was whether Vanessa would accept any of these harsh financial realities. Marcus was genuinely terrified to even bring up these recommendations with her, which told me everything I needed to know about their relationship dynamic. The guy was legitimately afraid of his own wife, not physically, but emotionally. He'd been conditioned over years to believe that Vanessa's happiness was entirely his responsibility, and that anything that upset her was automatically his personal failure as a husband. I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I called our parents one more time to try to get their help for Marcus. That turned out to be a massive mistake that I immediately regretted. "Your brother made his choices," my dad said flatly when I explained how desperate their situation had become. "He let his wife run their finances completely into the ground. That's not your problem to solve, and it's certainly not ours." I tried explaining just how bad things really were. The eviction notice, the mounting debt, the pregnancy, all of it. My mom jumped into the conversation at that point. "Maybe this is exactly what they need to learn a valuable lesson," she said coldly. "Marcus has always gotten bailed out his whole life whenever things got difficult. You certainly aren't helping the situation by throwing money at their problems instead of letting them face the consequences." The hypocrisy was absolutely staggering and infuriating. So when I refused to provide free babysitting, I was being selfish and abandoning family during their time of need. But when our parents refused to help their own son when he was at his absolute lowest point, that was just tough love and important life lessons. "That's completely different," my mother snapped when I pointed out this obvious double standard. "We raised him and did our part for 18 years. Your brother needs to grow up and handle his own responsibilities, and so do you." I was genuinely shocked at how quickly their golden boy treatment evaporated the moment Marcus actually needed substantial help. I hung up on them and immediately called Vanessa's parents, hoping they might be more reasonable. The result was exactly the same. They blamed Marcus entirely for the situation and refused to provide any assistance unless Vanessa left him and moved back to Ohio with Tyler. Apparently, in their twisted perspective, their precious daughter could do absolutely no wrong, even though she was clearly the primary architect of this entire financial disaster. "She always had such incredible potential," her father told me during our conversation. "Top of her class in accounting, fantastic career prospects ahead of her. Then she married your brother and got these ridiculous ideas about becoming famous on the internet. We warned her about him from the beginning. With all due respect, I said, trying to remain diplomatic, Vanessa is a grown adult who makes her own choices and decisions. Marcus didn't force her to quit her job or chase influencer fame. He should have stopped her father insisted stubbornly. A real man would have put his foot down and prevented this disaster from happening. I almost laughed out loud at the irony of that statement. If Marcus had tried to control Vanessa's career decisions, they'd be criticizing him for being controlling and unsupportive of his wife's dreams. There was literally no way for him to win with these people. They would find fault with any choice he made. With absolutely no support coming from any family members in either direction, I knew that Marcus needed to face Vanessa himself and have the difficult conversation about their financial reality. No more running interference, no more asking relatives for help, no more avoiding the hard truths. He needed to man up and address the core problem directly, without any safety nets or backup plans. I spent an entire evening coaching Marcus on what to say and how to approach the conversation with Vanessa. We role-played different scenarios, anticipated her likely reactions, and prepared counter-arguments for the excuses and emotional manipulation tactics she would probably use. By the end of our practice session, he seemed more confident and determined, though he was still scared as hell about the confrontation. "What if she just leaves me?" he asked, voicing his biggest fear about standing up to his wife. "Then you let her leave," I said firmly. "But at least you'll have your self-respect back, and you'll be able to rebuild your life on your own terms instead of living as someone else's doormat." The confrontation between Marcus and Vanessa was apparently absolutely nuclear when it finally happened. Marcus finally grew a pair and laid down some hard truths about their situation. The influencer career wasn't happening and never would happen. They were completely broke and facing homelessness. Major changes had to be made immediately if they wanted to survive financially. According to Marcus's account, Vanessa went through all 5 stages of grief right in front of him during their argument. She started by denying there was actually a problem and insisting that her follower count was growing steadily. Then she got angry and blamed him for not being supportive enough of her dreams. She tried to bargain for just a few more months to make her influencer career work. When none of those tactics worked, she collapsed in tears and accused him of crushing her spirit. "You don't believe in me," she sobbed dramatically. "Nobody believes in me or my potential." "It's not about belief," Marcus told her, sticking to the script we'd practiced together. "It's about facing reality. We're about to be evicted from our apartment. We can't afford groceries. We're having another baby. This lifestyle isn't sustainable, and we need to make changes now." Vanessa cried, screamed, threatened divorce, and tried every emotional manipulation tactic in her arsenal. But when none of that worked to change Marcus's mind, she finally admitted something crucial. She absolutely hated being an accountant and was terrified of going back to what she considered a boring, soul-crushing life. That's when Marcus surprised everyone, including himself, by not backing down or trying to comfort her. Instead of folding under the emotional pressure like he always had before, he pointed out that being broke and homeless would be significantly worse than having a boring but stable job. He offered her a reasonable compromise that showed he'd actually been listening during our coaching sessions. She could continue pursuing fitness content part-time while returning to accounting full-time, and they'd set aside a small budget for her content creation that wouldn't strain their finances or put their family at risk. I have to say, I was genuinely proud of Marcus for standing his ground for what might have been the first time in their entire marriage. He wasn't just nodding along with whatever Vanessa wanted anymore or trying to avoid conflict at all costs. He was actually acting like an equal partner in their relationship. "I told her she could still post content on weekends and build her following gradually," Marcus told me later. "She could still pursue her fitness goals as a hobby, but we needed her accounting income back if we were going to survive financially and provide for our children." The ultimatum approach worked, but not without some serious casualties to their relationship. Vanessa agreed to look for accounting jobs, though she made it clear she wasn't happy about returning to her old career. They began implementing most of the financial advisor's recommendations, starting with the most urgent changes. They moved to a smaller apartment in a much less expensive neighborhood. Marcus described it as half the size and a third of the price of their luxury place downtown. It wasn't in the trendy, Instagram-worthy part of town that Vanessa had insisted on for her content, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, actually affordable on their real income. They returned Vanessa's luxury SUV early, eating the substantial penalty fees just to get out from under the insane monthly payment that was draining their finances. The lease penalty was painful, but the long-term savings were essential for their survival. They kept Marcus's more modest vehicle, which was cheaper to maintain and made much more financial sense for their situation. Vanessa complained non-stop about having to drive a mom car instead of her flashy luxury ride that had been perfect for her Instagram aesthetic. But the financial savings weren't optional anymore. They were literally drowning in debt, and every expense had to be justified by necessity rather than image. They created and committed to following a strict household budget that eliminated all their previous wasteful spending habits. No more eating out 4 times a week when they could cook at home. No more $200 trips to Target for household essentials that were really just decorative items for Vanessa's Instagram photos. No more expensive gym membership when she could work out at home or use the local community center that cost a fraction of the price. They found a family-run daycare that was significantly more affordable than the fancy options Vanessa had been researching using my money, apparently. It wasn't the prestigious Montessori school with the perfect Instagram backdrop that Vanessa had been dreaming about, but it was clean. The staff was genuinely caring, and Tyler seemed to actually like being there with other kids his age. Most importantly, Marcus started setting real boundaries with Vanessa and refusing to be her mindless yes man anymore. He stopped parroting her words and ideas, and he started making his own decisions about their life and finances. It was like watching someone wake up from a years-long coma. I realized I'd been letting her run our entire lives for years, he told me during one of our follow-up conversations. Ever since we got married, it was just easier to go along with whatever she wanted than to deal with the drama and conflict of opposing her ideas. The real turning point in Marcus's transformation came when he applied for and actually got a much better job at a distribution company. The new position offered regular daytime hours instead of the unpredictable retail schedule, and it came with significantly better pay and benefits. It still didn't match what Vanessa used to make as a skilled accountant, but it was a solid step toward genuine financial independence and stability. One night after he'd been at the new job for a couple of weeks and received his first paycheck, he texted me with genuine excitement. "Man, I can't believe I spent years thinking I was stuck at that retail job. All because Vanessa convinced me it was the only place that would work with her demanding content creation schedule. Just got my first paycheck, and it's almost double what I was making before." When our parents heard about all the positive changes Marcus was making in his life, they immediately tried to take credit for his transformation. "See, we knew he'd figure it out eventually if we didn't enable him," my dad said smugly, as if their abandonment and refusal to help had been some brilliant master plan instead of just being shitty parents who couldn't be bothered to help their own son. I didn't bother arguing with them about their revisionist history. What actually mattered was that Marcus was finally standing on his own feet and making decisions based on reality rather than delusion. Things gradually stabilized into something that actually worked for their family. The financial advisor I had hired for Marcus and Vanessa turned out to be a complete game-changer for their situation. His approach was brutal and uncompromising, but it was exactly the reality check they desperately needed to avoid bankruptcy and homelessness. Marcus's personal transformation has been the most surprising and encouraging part of this entire ordeal. He actually went overboard in the other direction, and I started getting a little concerned about how aggressively he was asserting himself. He straight up called out our parents on their years of favoritism, followed by complete abandonment, telling them that their inconsistent treatment had messed him up psychologically more than they would ever understand or acknowledge. Our parents didn't take his newfound backbone very well at all. They claimed he was being ungrateful for everything they'd done for him over the years, conveniently forgetting about all the times they'd prioritized his needs over mine, and then refused to help when he actually needed support. Here's what's really funny. The more Marcus stands up for himself and makes his own independent decisions, the more I actually enjoy spending time with him again. We grabbed coffee together last week, and it was like having a real conversation with an actual person instead of listening to a Vanessa-programmed robot reciting her talking points about Instagram success and family obligations. Vanessa successfully found an accounting position that actually pays better than her previous job in Ohio. The new role came with better benefits and more opportunities for advancement, which was ironic considering how much she'd complained about returning to the boring world of accounting. She still posts workout videos occasionally on her social media accounts, but the grandiose delusion of Instagram fame has been replaced with a much more realistic hobby approach that doesn't interfere with their financial stability. The pregnancy is progressing well, and for the first time, they're actually financially prepared for the arrival of baby number 2. They have a proper budget that accounts for the additional expenses, they've found affordable healthcare coverage, and they're not relying on credit cards or family manipulation to make ends meet. The most surprising development in their relationship has been that Marcus and Vanessa started going to couples therapy together. After multiple explosive fights where Vanessa realized that her usual emotional manipulation tactics weren't working anymore, she finally agreed to work on their relationship dynamics with a professional counselor. Marcus told me that for the first time in their entire marriage, he feels like an equal partner rather than just an errand boy executing her plans and dreams. As for our relationship, we've managed to establish clear, healthy boundaries that work for everyone involved. I agreed to watch Tyler one Saturday per month so Marcus and Vanessa can have a proper date night and work on rebuilding their relationship. This arrangement actually works well because it's planned in advance. It's limited to just 1 day per month, and Tyler behaves significantly better now that his parents aren't constantly stressed, scattered, and fighting about money. My relationship with our parents remains permanently strained, and I'm completely fine with that outcome. They've tried to reconnect now that Marcus is doing better, sending texts about family unity and how proud they are of Marcus's progress and transformation. I'm keeping them at a comfortable distance because their pattern of conditional love and support has shown me exactly who they really are as people. As for Luna and me, we're back to our regular travel schedule and enjoying the lifestyle we worked so hard to create. We just got back from an incredible week exploring Peru, hiking Machu Picchu, and experiencing the culture we'd been dreaming about for years. We're currently planning a trip to Croatia later this year to explore the coastline and historic cities we've been researching. My work performance has returned to its previous high standards now that I'm not constantly interrupted by a disruptive 6-year-old during important client calls and creative sessions. I even received a well-deserved promotion last month that came with both a salary increase and more creative freedom on my projects. My boss pulled me aside recently and said, "Whatever was going on in your personal life a few months ago seems to be completely resolved. Your designs are back to being some of the best and most innovative work in the entire firm." It felt amazing to have my professional reputation restored after months of struggling to maintain quality while dealing with constant interruptions and family drama. The most important lesson I've learned from this entire exhausting experience is that sometimes being perceived as the asshole in the short term actually makes you the hero in the long term. Standing up for myself and refusing to be manipulated forced everyone else to face reality and find real solutions, instead of just using me as a convenient band-aid for their problems. By refusing to enable their bad decisions and poor planning, I inadvertently forced Marcus to grow a spine and take control of his own life. If I had continued providing free childcare and financial support, they would have kept making the same destructive choices indefinitely, getting deeper into debt while Vanessa chased her impossible dreams at everyone else's expense. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to let them face the natural consequences of their own choices, rather than shielding them from reality and enabling them to continue making destructive decisions. It was painful to watch Marcus struggle, but ultimately he became a stronger, more independent person because I refused to be his safety net. I'm genuinely proud of the man Marcus has become through this process. He's learned to think for himself, stand up for his family's real needs, and make decisions based on practical reality rather than wishful thinking. Our relationship is stronger now than it's been in years because we're interacting as equals rather than him trying to manipulate me into solving his problems. The whole experience taught me the importance of setting firm boundaries with family members, even when it's uncomfortable and they try to guilt trip you into changing your mind. You can love someone and still refuse to enable their destructive behavior or sacrifice your own well-being for their poor choices.